Hi, and welcome to the fourth grade curriculum preview for the fourth 6 weeks. We're going to go through the presentation that was linked in the SMORE. This one obviously is the voiceover version. If you would rather just look at the slides and then read the notes at the bottom of the screen, you're welcome to head back to the SMORE and take a look at the presentation that way as well. Whatever works best for you is great. So I just want to start off just reminding you of the importance of using the unit overview when you sit down and you get ready to plan for the upcoming unit. It will definitely save you some time looking through the resources. It'll give you lots of tips on some of the things that should be used with your students this 6 weeks. And it's also how you access the pacing guide and the clarifier. So if you're unclear on how to get to the unit overview, you can pause the presentation and then take a look at the instructions on the screen, and that should help you get there. Okay, so let's take a look at the pacing for this upcoming unit. I always like to start off with a calendar view. This year, or this unit, we have just 2 student holidays, and then we have the Science CBA that's coming up the week after the 6 weeks. So this just kind of gives you an overview of what's happening for this particular unit. And let's take a little bit more detailed look here with this view. So in the Unit 4 pacing guide, we have 3 content standards that are organized into 3 different mini units. And here you can see how I have it broken down into a mini unit of 7 days, and that's for properties of soil. And then 10 days for slow changes to the Earth's surface, and then 10 days for Earth's energy resources. So we're going to take a little bit closer look at why we have so many days for particular standards and what should be covered in that. So let's start off with properties of soil. That's going to be 7 classes, and it's going to be covering 4.7a, and then it's also going to incorporate in the process skill for using tools and recording information. The big ideas for properties of soil is that students understand that soil has different colors, different textures. It has different abilities to retain water. So for instance, if you think about gravel and you had a container full of gravel with a hole in the bottom, if you pour water through that container, the water is going to run right through. The gravel will not retain very much of the water, versus a container filled full of clay, and that has a hole in the bottom as well. If you pour water into that, not much water is going to come out because the clay retains more water. And that's related to particle size, which is something else that students can look at. And then going on to the next piece of the properties of soil, how well do different types of soil support the growth of plants? So those are the big things that we want to be looking at. And it will take about 7 days to thoroughly look at those things. Your big investigations are going to need to be coming in here with capacity to retain water, and then growth of plants. And we'll talk a little bit more about where you can find the resources for that. When we look down at the next mini unit for slow changes to the Earth's surface, we're talking about 10 class periods going over weathering, erosion, and deposition. But it's also very important that students understand how weathering, erosion, and deposition are processes that happen from wind, water, and ice. So when we talk about ice, we're really talking about glacial action. This one is not listed as a supporting standard per se in the TEKS, but we do include that for 5th grade to review. In fact, they're reviewing it this unit as well because it's really a key support for their aligned standard, which is 5.7b. This is a really abstract concept for kiddos to get, because these processes are very abstract and they take place over a long period of time. Having lots and lots of hands-on and modeling will really help them get that. And then the last mini unit we have are 10 classes where we talk about Earth's energy resources. So we're talking about the differences and examples of renewable resources, and the ones that are listed in the standard are air, plants, water, and animals. and then non-renewable resources, which are coal, oil, and natural gas, so the fossil fuels that we have. These two are in contrast only in the terms that one is renewable, meaning it can be replaced or it's inexhaustible, and the other one is non-renewable in that once we use it, it really can't be replaced, at least within a lifetime of usage for human use of that. So when we talk about resources, how do humans use air, plants, water, animals? Why are those considered to be renewable? Either because they can be grown or raised, more of them in a particularly short period of time for human use, or in the case of air, it's inexhaustible. Non-renewable resources, once we use coal, oil, and natural gas that we have in the ground, we really cannot replace that. And then the last piece of that is the conservation of both renewable and non-renewable resources. So this just gives you an overview of how to chunk the fourth 6 weeks into the 3 different parts. If you'd like to see the pacing guide as it's listed in the curriculum documents, just to remind you that you can find that at the top of the unit overview, and it's hyperlinked right there at the top of the the unit overview. And then just a reminder too that all the clarifiers are hyperlinked right there for your access. So if you click on the pacing guide hyperlink, you'll see this is the document that shows the pacing guide. And so here you'll see those 3 different mini units that I just went over. And then you'll see the process skills here on the right-hand side that are associated with those as well. Okay, so let's talk about what's new to your 4th graders. And the reason why I want to point out what's new to your 4th graders is because you'll want to linger a little bit longer as you hit this, because this is brand new information. So there's a lot of information on this slide. So let me start with the text in the middle. So this is all of the new content that your students have never really been exposed to before. And if you think about all 3 of these bullet points, really the overarching concept is change over time. And how do things change over time, even with the properties of soil, because those soils are part of the weathering and decomposition process, which they learned about in 3rd grade. So they've never really looked at properties of soil before. They've looked at soil in terms of color and just kind of general characteristics back in 1st grade, but this will be the first time they look at it very specifically. Let me move over to a couple of the pictures that relate to that. So with this properties of soil, your students are going to need to be growing plants in different types of soil this 6 weeks. There are radish seeds and lima bean seeds in the science lab, and there's also soil in there as well. The other thing that your students are going to need to do is investigate water retention of different soils. And the resources in the unit overview, the lessons in STEM scopes and aims, both have resources for you to do that, but I thought a visual might help with that. The second thing that we have on our list as new content are the slow changes to the Earth's surface, which is weathering, erosion, and deposition. And again, lots of modeling will need to be used to show these 3 different processes. And one tool in your science lab is the stream table, and that's a wonderful model that should be used for weathering, erosion, and deposition. And when you go into the unit overview, you'll see that there's actually a step-by-step how to set up the stream table. And if you have any questions about how to use that, there's lessons in the unit overview that use the stream table. But if you have any issues or trouble setting that up or how to use that, please reach out to me and I can help you out. And then the last piece that's brand new is talking about the difference between renewable and non-renewable resources and how they're conserved. And here's a nice little mnemonic device to help remember the non-renewables. That's a little bit harder for the kids to remember sometimes. So if we think about that, these things must be conserved. The first 3 letters in the word conserved is CON, which stands for coal, oil, and natural gas. Okay, so I wanted to also show you just a couple of ideas for some interactive word walls. Again, the concepts that you're covering with your kids this 6 weeks are pretty abstract, so the more visuals and the more hands-on we can do, the better they're going to be able to access and understand that information. So here was an example I found from Dr. Julie Jackson's Facebook page for interactive word walls, which is called Science Toolkit. And I really thought this was a nice example. This teacher obviously looked at the ability for different soils to be rolled into a ball. And what that refers to is that if you moisten different types of soil and you try to roll it into a ball, you can kind of determine how much clay it has in it. So the more clay it has, the more shape of a ball it's going to keep. So that's not a part of the standard per se, still an interesting characteristic that might relate to particle size, but it could just be looking at particle size and then doing some sort of measurement from largest to smallest or something like that. The other piece I really like on here is that the teacher has actually made an anchor chart of their investigation for their water retention investigation, which I thought was really a great idea. Here's another example from Dr. Jackson's Facebook page as well. Again, Science Toolkit is the name of the Facebook page. I liked this one because I could see evidence of student work on here and then actual photographs that came from their investigation. So just another example. I thought this was a really neat example as well. Same resource from Dr. Jackson's page. Different students brought in different soils from either their home or maybe on the way to school or around the campus. And you can see a variety of different kinds of soils. And it looks like they kind of started to sort them by by clay. Looks like one of them has a lot of clay and some of them have sand. So that's another way to make this very real for your students. The smart scopes and the hand lenses are great to look at particle size and color as well. And then here's one for the conservation aspect of resources, both renewable and non-renewable. So again, just another example of an anchor chart that's really helpful for students. And then here would be something that maybe your students could help build with you. And then we've got a more complicated word wall, which I think is really interesting. Maybe this was probably built over time. So we have wind, water, and ice change the Earth's landform. And then we have a guide here that talks about the surface is the topmost part of something. So that helps define Earth's surface, which is part of the standard. And then landform, and that kind of talks about what that will create when wind, water, and ice weather, erode, and deposit things. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to scaffold this. I think if I were to use this with my students, I would probably start with the outline first, leave everything blank, and just have those yellow pieces of tape on there first, and then start to build it over time as we started to investigate weathering, erosion, and deposition and the agents of that. So again, there's a lot on here, and you might be able to find ways to make this a little bit better for your usage. The thing I did want to just bring out is that once you have a word wall like this built, your students should be able to create summary statements and CER statements, which is claims, evidence, and reasoning, using this word wall. So the example I have written on here is students should be looking at this. They should be making some sort of claim. They should pull some evidence from the word wall and then provide a reason for that. So the example I have is that maybe a student were to look at the dune picture on here and say, I claim this dune is an example of wind, here's wind, deposition, okay, because the wind dropped the sand into a pile, which is the definition of deposition, dropping the sediment. And then this ties in the landform there. So kind of start wherever you are with this, but I just wanted to show you this example because it can be a really powerful teaching tool. Here's another anchor chart that we found to be really helpful for students to remember the processes of weathering, erosion, and deposition. couple of hints on this. Weathering, erosion, and deposition, they do happen in a cyclical manner, but for teaching what those processes are, it's, I think, best to keep it in the order of weathering, erosion, and deposition. Weathering is whenever rocks are broken down, either by wind, water, or ice. Erosion is when the sediment is carried or taken away from one place to another. And deposition is whenever that sediment is dropped. And so if students can start to make some sort of connection with the action or the verbiage of these processes, it will help these new abstract terms have more meaning to them. Okay, just want to wrap up with a couple of ideas for technology. There's a couple of ideas with some specific ties to your content for this particular unit. So if you haven't tried these and you'd like to, and you need some help, please contact your DLS. They're happy to help you with any of these ideas. And then just a quick reminder to make sure that you're accessing the vocabulary list from the clarifiers. Those clarifiers, again, are linked in the unit overview. I know many teachers like to use the STEM Scopes picture vocabulary, and it has some of the vocabulary, but not all. So if you're relying on that as your list, your students really are not going to be exposed to the vocabulary that they need to be to really be mastering that standard. Okay, and then I just want to wrap up with reminding you that you do have an academic coach for science, and that is me, Brenda Swerzinski. I'm happy to answer any emails. If you have a phone call or if you'd like me to come out, any way that I can help support your science program, I'm happy to do that, and I would love to hear from you. I'd also love to hear what you're doing that's really great in the classroom. I love to see pictures, and if I can include anything to share with other teachers, that's the most powerful way for us to learn is from each other. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a great 6 weeks, and please let me know if I can help you in any way.